very quick trading, microsecond trading, where the speed of the trade is so fast that you have to have your computers located at the exchange. If you're across the street, you're out of the game. You can't compete. And it's called co-location. So all the computers are right there on the floor below the exchange so that they're on a level playing field. They can all get their electrons up there at the same time. And one of the proposed reforms to try to make the market work better, to make people have a longer time horizon, more foresight, let's have things not just focused, so let's have a longer time horizon, was a proposal that if you make an offer to buy a share, you would have to keep that offer open for 1 second. For 1 second. And the market participants said, "Are you crazy? Are you wanting to go back to the Middle Ages? All the financial innovation that we've been working on so hard, are you willing to go back because of this one day in which we lost $1 trillion?" So that's where the debate is today in the United States. The problem is that these flash traders are actually destroying the rest of the market of people who are trying to make who think in maybe a day, or let alone a year. And so there really is a negative externality between the two. Well, so there's issues of transparency, incentives, but because of the corporate governance problems, providing incentives is going to be very difficult. And so we have to go beyond that. And so you have to actually restrict risk-taking. Now, this is just a little bit of a side for those of you who are professional economists. As you know, one of the big things that the banks have been driving at and saying more and more leverage. Okay, it was a big thing for more and more leverage. The basic insight in modern financial economics is this theorem by Modigliani and Miller, for which they got the Nobel Prize, which said that increasing leverage brings no benefit from a social point of view, or even a private point of view. Increasing leverage, because as you increase leverage, you are at the same time increasing risk. And in fact, there's a negative effect because as you increase risk, you increase the probability of bankruptcy if you increase leverage too much, and there are real social costs of bankruptcy. So there's a really important insight here that from a social point of view, a societal point of view, this drive for increasing leverage had no social benefit. And yet the bankers all were focusing on, let's increase leverage, even though it was at the same time increase. And there's one view of what they were doing is, what they were realizing is that increasing leverage, they get the upside and the taxpayers get the downside. So some people believe they aren't, they do understand Modigliani and Miller, but they also understand the bailout. A particular important part, as I mentioned before, of regulatory reform is dealing with the derivatives. But the real problem is most of the derivatives, the vast majority, about 80%, more than 80%, are written by four or five big American banks. So that, in effect, they are underwritten by the US taxpayer. And so they are, in effect, being subsidized today. There is a broader question that is being asked. The value of the outstanding derivatives was in the magnitude of about $60 trillion. And it was being described by the derivatives industry as insurance. The critics said it's gambling. The question was, if it was insurance, what was the $60 trillion of products that you were insuring, of assets that you were insuring? It's hard to find them. And as we look at what was going on, at least there are some intimations that a lot of this was, in fact, gambling. Well, another aspect of regulation is not only do we have to regulate the behaviors, we have to regulate the structures. That was the intent of Glass-Steagall. We repealed Glass-Steagall, but what the proposal called the Volcker Rule was to restrict what they call proprietary trading on the part of banks, was a way to bring this back into power, back in a modern adaptation. Finally, there's consumer and investor protection to try to avoid some of the worst behaviors that I described before. Well, the bill that was passed actually incorporated most, oh, there's one more thing I just mentioned, is resolution authority to enhance the ability of government to address problems when they arise. The bill that got through Congress recognized most of these principles, and in that sense, it was a major step forward. But it's also, one way of thinking about the bill is it's like a smelly Swiss cheese. While all the principles were there were so many holes to make it, exceptions to make it much less effective than one would have hoped. So on everything they did, I could go through every item on that list. There was a big exception. Take the consumer, the Financial Product Safety Commission. What they did is they exempted the second largest category of loans, that is used car, automobile loans. You ask, why should it be permissible to engage in dishonest lending to people who buy cars? And there's no answer other than the automobile industry came in and demanded that and got it through Congress. And that's true of each of these. So that in derivatives, there's a demand for transparency. And so what we said is 70% of them have to be transparent. The other 30%, the 30% that you don't want anybody to see, you don't have to let them see. So what we did is we increased, it was better than nothing, but it didn't go as far as it should have gone. Well, creating a global financial, a new global financial regulatory system is part of what is required to create a more stable global financial system. If we don't do it on a global basis, there will obviously be problems of circumvention. The problem is that it's very hard to get global coordination. And so what is happening at this juncture is there's been really an abandonment of the attempt to get global coordination. What each country is doing is deciding we have to pass, Europe and the United States, pass legislation in terms of what we think is appropriate to protect us, given what our legislation we can get through, and then afterwards have some degree of harmonization. Well, better regulation is only part of the answer. There are other instruments, taxing speculative activity and better systems of managing global risk. The current system doesn't work very well. One part of managing global risk that I don't have time to talk about is a new global reserve system. If we have time, I'll try to come back and talk about that. Part of the problem, though, is in each of these areas, getting the global agreement is very difficult because of deficiencies in global governance. We don't really, you know, we've become very interdependent. Economic globalization has outpaced political globalization. So we've you know, one way of thinking about this is back in the 19th century in the United States, we created a national economy, but when we created a national economy, we also had a